Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Marijuana remains illegal in Indiana, which means Hoosiers are increasingly crossing into Michigan and Illinois to purchase their THC products.
We get a lot of Indiana folks who are looking for medicinal relief, whether it's for their self or a loved one.
There are several bills in the State House this session pushing for legalization. More and more rural families are having trouble putting food on the table, and food banks are doing what they can.
There are still people more isolated and more spread out that don't really have the option to get into where that food distribution is happening.
But food banks can't solve the issue of hunger on their own. And we take a look at some of the bills currently making their way through the General Assembly. We'll have these stories, plus the latest news from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Things are heating up at the State House as the General Assembly moves into its second month. Now, one bill which would force school board candidates to declare a political party took a step closer to reality this week. Supporters of the idea say it creates greater transparency in school board elections. Opponents say it will inject hyper-partisanship into the process and discourage people from running. The House legislation attempts a compromise. Either the school board could vote to move to partisan races, or voters in that district could sign a petition to initiate a ballot referendum that could trigger partisan school board races.
There are some communities that want this, and there are some communities that don't. And through this amendment, they will be able to make that choice.
The committee approved the bill 6-4. It now heads to the House floor. A bill that would fund handgun safety training for school employees passed out of the House Education Committee this week. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Violet Cumber-Weiland reports supporters of the bill say it will help provide an extra level of security in schools.
Local school boards can already decide whether or not teachers or other staff can carry firearms on school grounds. This bill would reallocate funding for optional firearms instruction for school employees. Chris Lagoni is with the Indiana Small and Rural Schools Association. He says this option could further the level of protection smaller school districts can provide for their children.
I'm not sure people understand how few officers are actually on duty in a rural county if something were to happen.
The bill's author, Republican Representative Jim Lucas, says the bill is not meant to be forceful.
This training class, 40 plus hours, is designed to take the average person on the street and get them to a level of proficiency that in the event of an active shooter situation, they will at least have an opportunity to defend themselves and those around them if they so choose.
Those opposed to the bill address concerns such as improper storage of weapons and children getting a hold of weapons. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Violet Cumber-Weiland.
Immigrants without documentation would be able to get driving privilege cards from the state under a bill narrowly approved by a Senate committee Tuesday. The requirements to get the new driving card would almost be the same for getting a driver's license. But undocumented immigrants would also have to show they paid taxes in Indiana, have proof of insurance, get fingerprinted, and undergo a criminal background check. Law enforcement, business, and local government leaders support the bill.
We have to acknowledge the reality that businesses and employers throughout Indiana are dependent on immigrant labor.
The bill got pushback from senators who object to the state helping people who entered the country illegally and now moves to another committee. Well, several bills regarding the legalization of marijuana have been introduced at the State House this session, but it's unlikely the state will join its neighbors in legalizing recreational and medical marijuana sales. We're joined now by Ethan Sandweiss, who went up to Michigan to see what the buzz is all about.
Yeah, Joe. Videographer Devin Ridgway and I drove to a dispensary in Michigan just a few miles from the border. We were able to take a tour of a grow house and talk about Hoosiers who cross state lines to purchase marijuana legally.
Visit a marijuana dispensary in Niles, Michigan, and you're likely to find a lot of Indiana license plates in the parking lot. The town of fewer than 12,000 people boasts 8 dispensaries 3 miles from the state line. For Hoosiers such as Elkhart resident Nathan Cray, buying legal marijuana in Michigan is as easy as visiting the coffee shop.
It's pretty convenient, but I would support it being legal in Indiana too.
Cray is a Marine Corps veteran and bodybuilder. He was among a stream of Indiana shoppers at Southland Farms on a recent Friday afternoon.
Also, going to be very forced.
Cray purchased half an ounce of indica flower, which he said helps relieve his anxiety and recover after a workout.
I tend to smoke in Michigan, where it's legal. Big fan of the legal weed scene.
But not everyone who shops in Michigan smokes in Michigan. Many Indiana customers take marijuana back to their homes. By doing so, these legal shoppers violate both Indiana and federal law. Recreational marijuana is legal in Michigan, as it is in Illinois. Medical marijuana is legal in Ohio, and Kentucky forbids selling marijuana, but has medical exceptions for its use. Indiana does not. Indiana stores can sell some cannabis products, including CBD and Delta-8 THC. However, the main psychoactive compound in marijuana, Delta-9 THC, remains illegal in the state.
How you doing? Nathaniel, right? Yeah, Mike. Thanks for coming back in. We appreciate your business.
Mike Noonan is the owner and founder of Southland Farms. He moved to Niles from Chicago because, he said, Michigan law makes it easy for him to both sell marijuana and grow it in-house.
Very few states give small folks an opportunity to both produce the product and sell it to the public, and being able to do it all in one spot was what was really important to us.
Noonan said he chose Niles because he's familiar with the area, but being close to the state line has been good for business. Just south of Niles is South Bend, Indiana's 4th largest city. Noonan estimates that around 40% of his customers come from Indiana, many of whom use marijuana to cope with illness.
We get a lot of Indiana folks who are looking for medicinal relief, whether it's for their self or a loved one. They get diagnosed with a serious condition or they develop a chronic condition.
Noonan said his store follows Michigan laws, but beyond that, he isn't responsible for what happens with his product. According to him, plenty of Hoosiers go home with their cannabis.
We see them all the time. They go to their car, they open the trunk, they lock it in the trunk, and off they go because, denying patients the medicine that they deserve is really something that we're opposed to here.
Bringing small amounts of cannabis into Indiana is a crime, but that law is difficult to enforce. An officer needs probable cause to search a vehicle, like THC products sitting out in the open, and hundreds of cars pass between South Bend and Niles every day. According to South Bend Police Lieutenant Kyle Dombrowski, his department isn't out to get residents with small quantities of cannabis.
This is where discretion on law enforcement, having that police community relation aspect of whether it's writing a ticket for it, turning it in, or turning it in as found property and not pursuing criminal charges. Every situation is different.
The DEA isn't particularly focused on sending resources to stop Hoosiers taking dispensary marijuana between states either.
That's what warrants federal prosecution if it's, more than 100 plants with a root system or thousands of pounds of marijuana.
Marijuana is big business in Michigan. According to the state government, December sales set a record with consumers spending over $221 million. For the 2021 fiscal year, Michigan collected $172 million in licensing and tax revenue, which was used for road maintenance and education or sent back to municipalities. Several Indiana lawmakers have proposed legislation that would legalize marijuana, but so far they've had difficulty gaining traction. Democratic State Senator David Nitskotsky proposed Senate Bill 336, one of about a dozen marijuana bills introduced this session. If passed, Senate Bill 336 would enable cannabis to be sold and taxed in the state.
When you see the polls and you see the amount of people, it makes
no good sense not to just legalize it and do it correctly. Make sure you've got the right framework in place.
Despite the fact that a majority of Hoosiers want legalization, state lawmakers have been slow to follow. In the meantime, Indiana residents will continue crossing into neighbor states to purchase marijuana. Cray expects that one day they won't have to.
I expect Indiana and other states to follow suit, like Michigan and states that have legalized it for recreational use and medical. I think it's only a good thing.
So, Ethan, some of the bills in the State House would make a pathway to decriminalize the legalization, but not fully legalize it. Some allow medical, not recreational. Does having that broad range kind of hurt its chances of passing?
Well, Senator Newsdesk, who wrote legislation to legalize recreational marijuana, says for supporters it's more important to get some legislation passed, even if it's not the full amount that he wants.
We don't need every aspect of every bill, but well, let's form we sort of do have a coalition, but let's put them all together and put the best parts of every one, and let's just get this done.
Newsdesk sees the impact of marijuana laws up close. Not only does his district border Michigan, he actually lives 10 minutes away from Niles. And 40% of the workers at his family's company actually come from Michigan. He says it's unfair for employees to be able to do something legally in one state, but not in another.
I saw one Hoosier coming from Michigan kind of got caught with more than his fair share.
Yeah, Joe, it all came from a traffic stop when Matthew Scott Bell of Beech Grove was pulled over for speeding a few miles from the border in Steuben County. State police said there was a sealed package of gummies in clear view in the passenger seat. State police said a search of Bell's car turned up 8 pounds of marijuana and 7 pounds of edibles. Bell was preliminarily charged with possession and dealing marijuana.
All right, Ethan, thank you very much. Appreciate your reporting. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita is under investigation by the state Supreme Court Disciplinary Commission. The filing does not say exactly what Rokita is being investigated for, but it's related to cases involving Dr. Caitlin Bernard, who made national news after providing abortion care to a 10-year-old rape victim from Ohio. A lawsuit Bernard filed in state court last year to halt that investigation was unsuccessful, though a county judge did rule that Rokita violated state law by publicly discussing the matter before his office filed an official complaint. Well, we're joined now by Catherine Patterson for the latest headlines from around the state. Hello.
Hello. Monroe County is now without an election supervisor following the departure of longtime employee Karen Wheeler. She announced her resignation at a Board of Elections meeting on February 2nd. Wheeler alluded to several issues in recent elections, such as last year when more than 6,000 ballots weren't reported on time.
Every election will have problems, but a successful election is one that the problem is identified, a plan is created, and then that plan is executed. Every voter gets to vote. I have had 8 successful elections.
Wheeler served as election supervisor for more than 8 years. She says she hopes to stay a county employee. And homeowners could see a big jump in property tax bills this year due to skyrocketing home values. Indiana lawmakers want to provide some relief by lowering property tax caps for the next few years. And that's giving Terre Haute Mayor Duke Bennett deja vu. Property tax caps mean less revenue for Indiana cities and towns. Bennett says it took years for the city to eliminate a multi-million-dollar deficit in 2010 when the tax caps first took effect.
I always understand why our legislators want to protect the citizens of our state, but these are issues in certain areas.
He says this year's tax cap credits are going to be the biggest he's seen. Without tax caps, the city would have an additional $15 million to help fund its $105 million budget.
Everybody loves it when the value of their house goes up, but then the taxes come, and I understand the conflict there. I just don't know what the legislature is going to do to address that.
Property taxes are currently capped for homeowners at 1% of their assessed value. The bill that would lower that is being heard in a House Ways and Means Committee. And more than 300 Afghan refugees have settled across Indiana since evacuations began in August 2021 when the Taliban took control of Afghanistan. The director of a local resettlement agency says most who've lived in Indiana for over a year are employed, enrolled in language programs, and hoping for a path to citizenship. Benta Boutier reports.
U.S. Immigration Services gave Afghan evacuees parole status. It's used for urgent humanitarian need, but it doesn't include a path to permanent resident status or to citizenship, as refugee status does. Bloomington's Exodus Resettlement Director Aaron Aquino says resettlement groups want Congress to pass a law which would place eligible evacuees on a path to permanent citizenship.
And so we've been pushing for the Afghan Adjustment Act, which would allow Congress to just change their status automatically, which would not require lawyers to have to go to court and adjust that status in court. And for those that know, our immigration legal system is already overburdened.
Asylum and special immigration visas are possible next steps for many evacuees, but often take years to process, Aquino says. Immigration offices are hastening those applications along because parole status usually lasts 1 to 2 years. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Bente Boutier.
A new survey shows that more than a quarter of students choosing not to go to college see the cost as prohibitive. While more than 89% of Indiana residents see the value in education after high school, most do not know about financial aid opportunities. Vice President of Marketing for InvestEd, Bill Wozniak, says the cost of college may actually be much lower than most students think.
When they then look at their net price as opposed to the sticker price, so often the family sort of takes a moment, they take a breath, and they're like, wow, now we really have to think about this.
Indiana leads the Midwest in financial aid opportunities and ranks as one of the most generous states in the nation for amounts of available need-based aid, according to a 2022 Indiana College Cost Report. And more than 100 people attended a rally last weekend in Dunn Meadow in support of Asians, Asian Americans, and Pacific Islanders. The event was in response to last month's stabbing of an IU student on a city bus. Speakers urge community members not to focus on the legal challenges of declaring the attack a hate crime, but rather on prevention and acknowledging that racism and discrimination exist.
I've changed my name to a more Americanized one. I've tried to improve my English. I've even tried learning the basics of football. I've done all in an effort not to be so different. But the truth is, I cannot really hide.
The event was organized by the City of Bloomington and the Indiana chapter of the Asian Pacific Islander Public Affairs. Well, that's all the time I have for headlines. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Catherine. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Food banks are doing what they can to serve people in rural areas, but are finding more and more people in need of help. And Bloomington is hosting an exhibit of artwork by inmates, part of the Prison Arts Initiative project aimed at improving the lives of those behind bars. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
We care about things that affect the lives of every American.
We are there at the front line
to get to the heart of what really matters in every issue.
This country has not seen this in 80 years.
This extraordinary moment in American history.
You're making such a huge impact.
Trust is at the heart of what we do.
Life is full of choices, and right now your favorite member benefit, Passport, is offering more choices for you to stream.
Welcome to the club.
It's a beautiful thing with cooking.
I gotta let it cook, but I keep wanting to smell it.
Travel.
And here we are. Oh, yeah!
Documentaries.
I realized I could change the world.
And so much more. The choice is yours with Passport on the PBS Video app.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. The City of Bloomington is hosting a prison art exhibition in City Hall's Atrium Gallery featuring artwork by 10 inmates at Putnamville Correctional Facility. Kayan Terra reports on the program aimed at helping jail and prison inmates.
Oliver Nell was inspired by the Alabama Prison Arts and Education program when he attended Auburn University as an undergrad. Now the program coordinator for the Indiana University's Prison Arts Initiative, Nell has brought the idea to the Hoosier State.
There's resources through where I work, the IU Arts and Humanities Council, to put this on, and we sort of had a model through the program back in Alabama, and so we felt like this was it was an environment that was kind of ripe for this sort of work.
The initiative began at Putnam Correctional Facility last fall. Inmates took classes in visual arts techniques, creative writing, and bookmaking, all taught by former and current IU graduate instructors. Holly Warren is the Assistant Director of the Arts in the City of Bloomington. She says this project adds to the ongoing conversations about restorative justice programs in Indiana prisons and jails.
I think it's moving us in the right direction of really valuing human rights overall. And so we do hope that by demonstrating this kind of work and how this just really brings out a thriving element of these students, we're kind of helping perpetuate and move that conversation forward.
Nell and Warren hope the initiative expands and continues to bring the arts as an option to those incarcerated in Indiana.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Kayan Tara.
The exhibit runs through February 17th. According to a survey from nonprofit group Save the Children, 64% of rural voters say they or someone they know is struggling to feed their families. Clayton Baumgarth went out to learn about the underlying causes of hunger in rural Indiana.
In Spencer, Indiana, just off of State Road 46, sits Spencer United Methodist Church.
So this is where we display items for sale in here, and we've see there's a big variety of items that we have.
For 21 years, the church has been operating a thrift store and using the proceeds to help distribute food once a week to people in Spencer and surrounding communities.
A group of us that got together, I think there was about 10 of us when that started 21 years ago, and it was just part of the church mission that we wanted to help people with food.
A recent study conducted by nonprofit group Save the Children Action Network found that 64% of rural respondents say that they or someone they know is struggling with food insecurity. Among parents, 77% are worried they might not be able to afford enough food to feed their family over the next year.
Are they allowed to come every week if they...
We ask them to come once a month,
okay,
and we kind of keep track of that, but if they need food, they need food.
Mm-hmm. Spencer United Methodist operation has had to evolve to meet the needs of more and more people who are having difficulty getting enough food on the table. Vault estimates the church feeds an average of 80 to 150 families a week. Hoosier Hills Food Bank in Bloomington provides about 40% of the goods distributed by the church. Spencer Methodist is responsible for purchasing the other 60%, an amount that has become more challenging to meet thanks to higher than average food prices.
And with the COVID, it's kind of changed things for us. We used to be able to get by a week spending about $1,500 to take care of that 150-some families. Now it's over $3,000 a week that we do.
Vault says that while they're serving the same number of families, he's noticing more new faces coming in every week. In his opinion, the job market is a major cause of rural hunger.
I think a lot of it is the jobs, what's happening now in the job areas. It's like it seemed like all the jobs started going at different places, and then now a lot of people are getting laid off. When that happens, they got to do something.
In rural areas specifically, getting to food is a major hurdle. Spencer United Methodist used to deliver food throughout the county to 450 families. That's been cut to about 120 families because of lack of volunteers and fears of spreading COVID.
We can do mobile pantries, but those generally still try to go to a population center or a senior center or something like that, and there's still people more isolated and more spread out that don't really have the option to get into where that food distribution is happening.
Food banks carry a lot of pressure on their backs to get food to those in need, but that work is only able to go so far without assistance from all levels of government. Save the Children Action Network advocates heavily for policy change, as do a majority of the people they surveyed.
These issues aren't new, and we know ways that we can address them. We know ways for policymakers to step up here.
Of the policy proposals that were tested in the survey, all of them received support from more than 3/4 of rural voters. Popular policy ideas included making it easier for farmers markets to accept food assistance benefits, giving more children access to backpack programs, and offering more programs to rural communities that allow food deliveries and mobile pantries.
As the 118th Congress gets underway, we will be talking to lawmakers at all levels of government about the need to take action now and about the fact that not only is it the right thing to do, it's what their constituents are asking for, and it's what they need to address the problems they face.
For Alonzo, their efforts are incredibly important to those in need.
We're not the ultimate solution, obviously. There needs to be a lot of higher level work done in terms of policy changes and program changes so that people don't need services like ours.
But the reality is, food banks can't solve the issue of hunger in America on their own. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Clayton Baumgarth.
Hoosier Hills Food Bank celebrated 40 years of serving the community in 2022 and is estimated to distribute around 7 million pounds of food every year. A record 13,046 turned out to see the Indiana women Thursday night at Simon Scott Assembly Hall, and the second-ranked Hoosiers did not disappoint. Grace Berger and Mackenzie Holmes combined for 50 points to lead IU past number 5 Iowa 87-78. The win gives IU a game-and-a-half lead in the Big Ten over the Hawkeyes, who swept the Hoosiers last season.
I remember losing to them 3 times last year, and in the Big Ten championship game. So, anytime we play a great team like that, it means a little more.
IU is now 23-1 overall and 13-1 in the Big Ten. 4 games left in the season. Indiana announced its home finale against Purdue February 19th is sold out. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.